"Don't touch the glass, please." The voice wasn't mean, just tired. It was the third time the man in the charcoal suit had said it, his words polished as smooth as the marble floors. 10-year-old Cora Roth pulled her hand back from the floor-to-ceiling window. Below, the city glittered like a spilled box of jewels, a breathtaking view she was supposed to love. But from 50 floors up, the cars were silent beetles, the people invisible. It was a beautiful painting of a world she couldn't visit. The silence in the penthouse was louder than the party had been. It was a thick, expensive silence, the kind that settled after caterers packed away the last of the canapes and the final business associate had shaken her mother's hand with a too-wide smile. Cora's 10th birthday party had been a masterpiece of corporate event planning. There were floral arrangements that cost more than a vacation, a string quartet playing music no one listened to, and a cake shaped like the newest skyscraper her mother's company was funding. There were no balloons. There were no other children. Her mother, Lenora Roth, found her by the window. Lenora didn't walk. She moved through rooms like a current, displacing the air around her. She was beautiful, with her dark hair pulled into a severe knot and a dress that looked like spun moonlight. She knelt, a rare gesture that always felt rehearsed, her silk dress rustling in protest. "Did you enjoy your party, darling?" The question was a line item on a checklist. Birthday party, executed. Cora gave the practiced nod she knew her mother expected. It was nice. "Thank you." Lenora's smile was brief, efficient. "Good. Now for your real present." She led Cora not to a brightly wrapped box, but to a sleek, silver case resting on the granite coffee table. Inside, nestled in black foam, was a headset that looked like something from one of her mother's tech labs. A state-of-the-art virtual reality system. "The servers are proprietary," Lenora explained, her voice warming with the familiar passion she reserved for technology and profit margins. "The resolution is flawless. You can climb Everest, scuba dive the Great Barrier Reef, walk the streets of Paris. The world is yours now, Cora. No limitations." Cora looked from the headset to her mother's expectant face. Lenora saw a problem. A girl confined to a chair, and she had purchased the most elegant, expensive solution. She hadn't bought a gift, she had acquired an upgrade. Cora felt a familiar ache settle behind her ribs. She didn't want to climb a virtual mountain. She wanted to go to the park down the street. She didn't want to see a simulation of Paris. She wanted a friend to whisper secrets with. "Thank you, Mom," she said, because it was easier than explaining. Lenora kissed the top of her head, the touch as light and fleeting as a thought. "I have a call with the Tokyo board. Get some rest." And then she was gone, leaving Cora with a box full of worlds she didn't want to visit alone. The silence returned, heavier this time. Cora wheeled her chair, a marvel of engineering that could pivot on a dime and ascend stairs, another of her mother's solutions, away from the window. The chair was fast and silent, but tonight it felt like a cage, just a more mobile one. She couldn't sleep. The virtual worlds in the silver case felt like a taunt. She rolled past her bedroom, past her mother's closed office door from which the faint, sharp cadence of a business call could be heard. The elevator chimed softly, opening its brass doors for her. On impulse, she pressed the button for the lobby. She didn't know why. Maybe she just needed to see a space that wasn't hers, a room that wasn't curated to her needs and her mother's specifications. The lobby of the Onyx was a cathedral of wealth. Marble floors stretched out like a frozen lake, and a chandelier hung from the vaulted ceiling like a captured constellation. It was always empty at this hour, a silent, gleaming testament to the lives being lived invisibly, stories high above. But tonight, it wasn't empty. In a small, forgotten alcove near the service corridor, a man was on his knees, his back to her. He wore the simple gray uniform of the building's night crew. A large, industrial bucket sat beside him, the scent of lemon-scented cleaner hanging faintly in the air. He wasn't cleaning, though. He was leaning over a small boy who sat cross-legged on the floor. a large sketchbook open across his lap. The man's voice was a low murmur, a stark contrast to the sharp, articulate tones of her mother's world. "See? If you make the shadow a little darker here," he whispered, his finger tracing a line on the paper, "it looks like the dragon's wing is really lifting off the page." The boy, who couldn't be more than 7, nodded seriously, his tongue sticking out in concentration as he smudged the charcoal with his thumb. Cora stopped her chair, the quiet hum of its motor suddenly feeling like a shout in the stillness. The man stiffened, hearing it, and slowly rose to his feet. He was tall and slender, with kind eyes that looked startled and a little bit worried. He wiped his hands on his trousers reflexively. "I'm sorry, miss," he said, his voice quiet, respectful. "I didn't see you. Is everything all right?" He glanced nervously toward the sleeping security guard at the main desk, then back at his son, who was now staring at Cora with wide, curious eyes. "I'm Ansel Gray," the man said, as if offering his name might fix whatever rule he was breaking. "This is my son Rowan. His sitter canceled last minute. He's supposed to be in the break room." The apology was layered. "I'm sorry he's here. I'm sorry you see us. I'm sorry I'm not invisible." Cora found her voice. "I'm not going to tell anyone." Ansel seemed to relax by a fraction. "Thank you." Rowan, however, felt no such caution. He scrambled to his feet, holding up the sketchbook. "Look, I'm drawing a griffin. His name is Scorch." The drawing was surprisingly good, full of life and energy. The griffin's wings did look like they were lifting off the page. "Wow," Cora said, and the word was genuine. "He's amazing." Rowan beamed. He took a step closer, his gaze dropping to her chair. He didn't have the polite filter of the adults in her life who pretended not to see it. His curiosity was pure, unvarnished. "Is that a spaceship?" he asked, his eyes wide with awe. Ansel's face flushed. "Rowan, that's not—" "It's okay," Cora cut in, a small, unfamiliar bubble of amusement rising in her chest. She looked at the boy. "No, it's a wheelchair. But sometimes, when I go really fast down the hall, I pretend it's a spaceship." Rowan's eyes lit up. "Can it shoot lasers?" "Not yet," Cora said, a real smile touching her lips. "I haven't figured out how to install them." Ansel watched the exchange, a soft, astonished look on his face. He saw the loneliness in this girl's eyes, a loneliness so profound it seemed to fill the grand, empty space around her. He knew he should be sending his son to the break room and getting back to his work, every instinct for self-preservation screaming at him to blend back into the polished background. But he also saw the first real smile he imagined she'd had all day. He pulled a small, worn stool from behind his cart. "My shift doesn't end for another hour," he said, the words feeling risky, but right. "We're not supposed to have company, but the marble won't mind if we wait to polish it." Cora hesitated for only a second. Then she rolled her chair closer, her eyes fixed on the griffin in Rowan's sketchbook. For the first time all day, she felt like she was at a party meant just for her. Cora positioned her chair beside the low stool, the powerful motor humming into silence. For a moment, no one spoke. The vast lobby held its breath around them, the only sounds the distant groan of the building settling and the frantic, happy scratching of Rowan's pencil. Ansel picked up a discarded rag and began methodically polishing the base of a large marble pedestal, his movements slow and deliberate, a quiet rhythm that made the space feel less like a museum and more like a workshop. "He has a whole world in that book," Ansel said, his voice soft, nodding toward his son. "A new kingdom every week. Last week it was populated by sentient vegetables. The king was a very noble potato." Cora giggled, a sound that felt rusty in her own ears. "What happened to him?" "Betrayed by the scallions," Rowan mumbled without looking up. "They were sneaky." He flipped a page, revealing a detailed drawing of a fortress made of books, its ramparts lined with tiny, fierce-looking squirrels. This is Fort Acorn. The squirrels are guarding a magic library. You're a really good artist, Cora said, meaning it. The adults in her life praised her for things she accomplished. Grades, coding exercises, mastering a new piece on the piano. No one ever just praised her for being. But Rowan's art wasn't an accomplishment. It was a part of him. And she knew instinctively that complimenting it was like complimenting the color of his eyes. My dad teaches me, Rowan said proudly. He says a line is just a thought taking a walk. Cora looked at Ansel. He offered a small, self-deprecating shrug. It's something my own father used to say. He was a cartographer, drew maps. He believed every road had a story. Do you draw? Cora asked him. Not anymore, Ansel said, his eyes going distant for a moment. I just help with the shadows now. He turned his attention back to the pedestal, but Cora could feel his gaze on her, gentle and curious. He wasn't looking at her chair. He was looking at her face, trying to read the story there. The silence that fell between them this time was different. It was comfortable, like a shared blanket. Cora found herself talking, the words spilling out in a quiet rush she couldn't control. She told them about a book she was reading, about a girl who could talk to birds. Rowan's eyes went wide, and he immediately started sketching a bird with a crown on its head. She told them how the building's elevators sometimes made a sighing sound just before the doors opened, like they were tired. Ansel nodded. That's the pneumatic pressure release, he said, but I like tired sigh better. I'll start calling it that. He didn't talk down to her. He didn't simplify his language or adopt the overly bright, patronizing tone the therapists and tutors used. He just listened, and then he added a piece of his own world to hers. For 10, maybe 15 minutes, they were just 3 people in a quiet room, sharing stories. Rowan showed her a drawing of his hamster, Chester, wearing a tiny superhero cape. Cora told him she'd always wanted a pet, but her mother said they were impractical in a hermetically sealed environment. Chester's not impractical, Rowan said fiercely. He's brave. He runs on his wheel for hours. He's training. The chime of the main elevator announcing its arrival from the upper floors shattered the quiet bubble they had built. Ansel straightened up instantly, his posture shifting from relaxed father to diligent employee. He quickly nudged the sketchbook back into a worn canvas bag. Time for you to be in the break room, buddy, he whispered to Rowan. The heavy glass doors of the lobby swung open, and a man in a crisp security uniform strode in. He was older, with a stern face, and a gaze that swept the lobby like a searchlight, looking for imperfections. He nodded curtly at Cora. Miss Roth, I trust your evening was pleasant. His eyes flickered to Ansel, and then to the small canvas bag, a flicker of disapproval in them. Gray! The North Corridor marble needs another pass. I saw scuffs. Yes, Mr. Jennings, right away, Ansel said, his voice respectfully blank. Mr. Jennings' gaze lingered on Cora for a second too long. It's late for you to be down here, miss. Your mother prefers the lobby to be clear after midnight for security sweeps. It wasn't a suggestion. I was just leaving, Cora said, her voice small again. The magic of the last 15 minutes was dissolving under the security chief's sterile gaze. She turned her chair around, the quiet hum seeming to echo Ansel's quick, apologetic glance. As she rolled toward the elevator, she heard Rowan's small voice whisper, Will you come back tomorrow? Cora paused, her hand hovering over the control joystick. She glanced back. Ansel gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head, a warning born of fear for his job. But Rowan was looking at her with such open, hopeful expectation. Maybe, she whispered back, and the word felt like a promise. When the elevator doors closed, sealing her back into the silent, gilded world of the penthouse, she could still feel the warmth from the lobby clinging to her. She rolled into her apartment. The lights were dimmed, and the silver VR case on the table seemed to mock her. Her mother emerged from her office, phone pressed to her ear. She put a hand over the receiver, her expression distracted. Cora, you're still up. Did you try the headset? The graphics on the Kilimanjaro program are supposed to be extraordinary. I'm tired, Cora said. I'm going to bed. Lenora's focus had already drifted back to her call. Fine, we'll try it tomorrow. I've scheduled a technician to walk you through the advanced functions at 10. She turned and disappeared back into her office, the door clicking shut. Lying in her bed, surrounded by soft fabrics and smart technology, Cora felt a pang of longing so sharp it was a physical ache. It wasn't for a technician or for the peak of a virtual mountain. It was for a scuffed-up sketchbook, the smell of lemon polish, and a 7-year-old boy who thought her wheelchair might be a spaceship. It was for the quiet janitor who didn't look at her like she was broken, but like she was just a person, sitting in a quiet room, sharing a story. She closed her eyes and saw a griffin with charcoal wings taking flight. And for the first time in a very long time, she had something to look forward to tomorrow. The word maybe became the most important word in Cora's vocabulary. It was a hinge on which her entire day swung. The tutors, the physical therapists, the blandly encouraging messages her mother left with the household staff. All of it was just the time she had to get through until night fell. Her real life began after midnight, in the silent, echoing lobby of the Onyx. The meetings became their secret ritual. It started with whispered conversations in the alcove, with Ansel polishing the same section of marble until it gleamed, a plausible excuse for lingering. Rowan would sit with his sketchbook, a silent co-conspirator, occasionally holding up a new creation for Cora's approval. A dragon made of starlight, a badger wearing a monocle, a tree whose leaves were tiny, open books. Soon, their small corner expanded. Ansel brought in a folded blanket so Rowan wouldn't have to sit on the cold floor. Cora started bringing things down with her. A book she thought Rowan might like, a bag of sour candies she'd bribed the chef to buy for her, a small tablet on which she showed them a time-lapse video of a flower blooming. Ansel watched, his heart a complicated mix of joy and terror. He saw life returning to Cora's eyes, a light that had nothing to do with the building's expensive fixtures. He was breaking a dozen rules, risking the job that kept a roof over his and Rowan's heads. But every time he saw Cora's genuine, unforced smile, the risk felt less like a choice and more like a necessity. Cora was changing. The staff noticed it first. She started greeting them in the mornings. She asked the chef his name. She left a drawing Rowan had made for her, a smiling sun with crooked rays, taped to the door of the head housekeeper's office. Her world, once confined to the 50th floor, was beginning to grow roots that reached down into the hidden life of the building. Lenora Roth noticed it too, but she saw it through the lens of a spreadsheet. She sat across from Dr. Alani, Cora's developmental psychologist, during their bi-weekly video call. Her engagement metrics are up 17%, Lenora said, tapping a polished nail on the tablet in front of her. Her teachers report more active participation and her sleep patterns have stabilized. The VR therapy is clearly a success. Dr. Alani, a kind woman with weary eyes, pushed her glasses up her nose. Or perhaps she's just maturing, Lenora, finding her own way to connect. It's the stimulation, Lenora insisted, dismissing the observation. We've provided a superior alternative to traditional interaction. The data is unequivocal. She ended the call, satisfied. She had identified a problem, invested in a solution, and was now seeing a positive return. It was a successful business model. She made a mental note to authorize a performance bonus for the VR system's developers. Down in the lobby, the real reason for Cora's progress was teaching Ansel how to play Go Fish with a deck of cards Rowan had designed himself, where the suits were replaced by griffins, trolls, goblins, and phoenixes. Do you have any fire-breathing trolls? Cora asked, trying to keep a straight face. Ansel studied his hand with mock seriousness. No, ma'am, you may go fish in the enchanted sea. He smiled as she plucked a card from the pile. He'd never seen her laugh so easily. The sound was still quiet, but it was real. The danger, however, was just as real. Mr. Jennings had started making his final nightly rounds later and later. He'd appear without a sound, his presence a sudden drop in the room's temperature. "Gray," he said one night, stopping directly in front of their corner. Rowan quickly hid the cards under his blanket. "I found a smudge on the brass plating of elevator C. See to it." He didn't look at the smudge. He looked at Cora. "Miss Roth, your mother was asking the concierge if you were in your room. She's concerned about your sleep schedule." "I'm fine," Cora said. Jennings' eyes narrowed slightly. "This lobby is not a playground. It's the face of $1 billion property. And you," he fixed his gaze on Ansel, "our staff, your job is to be invisible. Are we clear?" "Crystal," Ansel said, his voice level, but his hands tightened on the handle of his cleaning cart. The message was unmistakable. After Jennings left, a tense silence settled over them. "I'm sorry," Cora whispered, her eyes cast down. "I'm getting you in trouble." "Hey," Ansel said gently, kneeling beside her chair so he was at her eye level. "Look at me. This isn't your fault, and nothing has happened." He hesitated, then made a decision. "This place, it's big and shiny, but it can be lonely. For everyone, not just the people who live on the 50th floor. He glanced at Rowan, who was watching them with worried eyes. "Sometimes, a little bit of company is worth a few scuff marks on the floor." Cora looked at him, at the lines of exhaustion around his eyes and the genuine kindness in them. "Why are you a janitor?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. "You know about art, and pneumatic pressure, and people." Ansel smiled, a sad, distant expression. "My wife, Rowan's mom, she was the artist, a real one. She could make a lump of clay look like it was about to get up and walk away." He looked over at Rowan's sketchbook. "She got sick. The medical bills, well, they were impressive. I took any shift I could get. After she was gone, I just kept going. This job lets me be with him." He pointed with his chin toward Rowan. "My day job is being his dad. This," he gestured to the marble floors and gleaming brass, "this just pays the rent for that." It was the most he had ever said about himself. Cora felt a profound sense of privilege, of being trusted with a piece of his story. It was a currency she understood far better than the stock tickers that were the constant background noise of her mother's life. "She would have loved your drawings," Cora said softly to Rowan. Rowan nodded, accepting it as fact. "I know. Dad says she's the one who sends me the ideas." Ansel stood up, the moment of shared vulnerability passing. "All right, team, it's getting late. Time to vanish before the security cyclops comes back." They packed up their small camp of friendship. The blanket, the sketchbook, the enchanted cards. As Cora rolled to the elevator, she turned back. Ansel was watching her, a look on his face she couldn't quite decipher. It was the look of a man standing on a shoreline, watching a small boat he'd helped fix sail out into a deep, uncertain sea. It was a look of hope, mixed with a terrible, profound fear of the coming storm. The change in Cora was like a slow sunrise. The tentative light she'd found in the lobby began to seep into the rest of her life. She started a new notebook, not for her school assignments, but for herself. In it, she drew diagrams, flowcharts, and lists. Her mother's world was full of apps. Apps to monitor investments, apps to streamline logistics, apps to optimize human performance. They were all about efficiency. Cora's idea was about something else, dignity. She began to sketch an interface for a new kind of accessibility program. It wasn't about just getting from one place to another. It was about knowing, in advance, if a restaurant's bathroom door was wide enough, if a museum had a quiet room for when the noise became too much, if a park's pathway was paved or loose gravel. It was a map of the world, not as it was built, but as it was experienced. She used the high-powered computer her mother had provided for the VR system to watch coding tutorials, her brow furrowed in concentration as she taught herself the language of creation. The silver headset lay in its case, untouched. One night, she tucked her notebook into the pouch on the back of her chair and went down to the lobby. Ansel and Rowan were already in their corner. Rowan was meticulously coloring a map of a fantasy world he'd invented. "This is the Whispering Woods," he explained to Cora, pointing with a green crayon. "The trees tell you secrets if you listen." "I have a secret," Cora said, her voice barely above a whisper. She felt a nervous flutter in her stomach. This was different from sharing a book or a bag of candy. This was sharing a piece of her mind. She pulled out her notebook and opened it on the floor between them. Ansel leaned in, wiping his hands on a clean rag before touching the corner of the page. He saw the neat boxes, the arrows, the carefully lettered notes. "What is this, Cora?" "It's an app," she said. "I call it the Open Door. People could add information themselves, about places, so people like me, so we would know before we go, so we don't have to ask or feel like a problem." Rowan peered at the drawing. "You should make the buttons look like keys, because they unlock places." Cora's face lit up. "That's a great idea, Rowan." Ansel studied the sketches, his expression one of deep, undisguised admiration. He saw the logic, the empathy, the clear-eyed purpose in the design. He saw the mind of an engineer and the heart of a poet. "Cora, this is brilliant," he said, his voice full of a genuine respect she had never heard from any adult. "It's practical. It's important." He tapped a diagram she'd made for navigating a crowded space. "Have you thought about adding a feature that shows the noise level? Sometimes a crowd is a bigger wall than a staircase." Cora stared at him. It was the exact feature she had been trying to figure out how to implement that afternoon. He didn't just see her idea, he understood it. In that moment, sitting on the cold marble floor of a silent lobby, she felt more seen than she ever had in her mother's gleaming penthouse. Their collaboration was interrupted by the soft chime of the private elevator, the one that went directly to the penthouse without stopping. Ansel's head shot up. His blood ran cold. It was too early for Lenora Roth to be home. His eyes darted around the lobby. There was nowhere to go. "The supply closet," he hissed, grabbing Rowan's hand and pulling him up. "Now." He shoved the sketchbook into the canvas bag and practically threw it behind his cart. "Cora, just be quiet." He and Rowan slipped into the narrow, dark closet seconds before the elevator doors slid open. Cora's heart hammered against her ribs. She quickly slid her notebook under the cushion of her seat, her hands trembling. Lenora Roth strode into the lobby, her phone already to her ear. She was in the middle of a sharp, commanding conversation. "No, the valuation is soft. If they won't concede on the equity split, we walk. Liquidate their position and let them choke on it." She stopped, her eyes landing on her daughter. She lowered her phone, her expression a mixture of surprise and irritation. "Cora? What on earth are you doing down here at this hour?" "I couldn't sleep," Cora said, her voice tight. "I like watching the traffic from the front doors." Lenora's gaze swept the empty lobby. "This is becoming a concerning habit. Your sleep is vital. I'll have Dr. Alani adjust your melatonin dosage." She came closer, her eyes sharp, analytical. "You look flushed. Are you running a fever?" She reached out to press the back of her hand against Cora's forehead, her touch cool and clinical. From inside the closet, Ansel held his breath. He had Rowan pressed against him, the boy's small body trembling. Through the thin slat of the door, he could see Lenora's expensive shoes, inches from his hiding place. One wrong move, one sneeze from Rowan, and it was all over. "I'm fine, Mom. Just tired." Lenora seemed to accept this, her mind already moving on to the next crisis. "Well, come up now. I have to be on a call with Hong Kong in 5 minutes." She turned and strode back to the elevator without a backward glance, assuming her daughter would follow. The doors closed, and she was gone. Cora waited, counting to 60 in her head before she let out a shaky breath. "You can come out." Ansel and Rowan emerged from the closet. Ansel's face was pale, his hands unsteady. Rowan looked frightened. The game was over. The pleasant fiction they had maintained had just collided with the cold, hard reality of their situation. "I have to go," Ansel said, his voice strained. He started gathering his things, his movements jerky. "We can't do this anymore, Cora. It's not safe. If she'd seen us—" He trailed off, the words hanging in the air. He could lose everything, his job, his apartment, the fragile stability he had fought so hard to build for his son. Cora wheeled her chair forward, her own fear replaced by a fierce, protective resolve. "No," she said, her voice low but firm. She pulled the notebook out from under her cushion and opened it to a fresh page. "Look." Ansel stopped. On the page, she had quickly sketched a new button for her app, shaped just like Rowan had suggested. A small, elegant key. Next to it, she wrote, "Noise level indicator." Ansel's idea. He stared at the page, at the evidence of their shared creation. This wasn't just a game anymore. It wasn't just a secret friendship. They were building something real and important that existed only in this small, forbidden bubble of time after midnight. To stop now felt like abandoning the most hopeful thing in any of their lives. He looked from the notebook in her lap to the scared, hopeful face of his own son. He knew what Mr. Jennings would say. He knew what Lenora Roth would do. He also knew he couldn't stop. "Okay," he said, the word a surrender and a vow all at once. He ran a hand through his hair. "Okay, but from now on, one of us stays by the elevator, as a lookout." Cora nodded, a wave of relief so powerful it almost made her dizzy. They were on borrowed time, and the clock was ticking louder now. But as Ansel went back to his cart and Rowan picked up his charcoal pencil, she looked down at the key she had drawn and knew, with absolute certainty, that they were right to keep turning it. The fear from that near miss didn't fade. It simply became a part of their routine. Their corner of the lobby now had a lookout. Sometimes it was Rowan, who would sit near the main corridor with his sketchbook, tasked with coughing loudly if he heard the telltale chime of the private elevator. Other times, Ansel would work his way methodically toward the front entrance, his cart and bucket a perfect disguise, his eyes constantly scanning the bank of elevator lights. The friendship was now laced with the thrill of a secret mission, a quiet conspiracy against the sterile, managed world of the Onyx. The centerpiece of that conspiracy was Cora's app. Night after night, she brought her tablet down, the screen glowing in their dim corner. She showed them the lines of code she'd written, the way a button would change color when pressed. Ansel, whose knowledge of the building was as intimate as a surgeon's knowledge of a body, became her lead field tester. "That automatic door on the west terrace," he'd say, pausing from wiping down a brass railing. "The sensor is slow. It doesn't open until you're right on top of it, which is fine if you're walking, but in a chair, you have to stop cold so you don't run into it. That's a data point." Cora's fingers would fly across the screen. "Data point logged. West terrace door. Sensor lag time approximately 1.5 seconds. He told her how the polished concrete in the parking garage became slick as ice when it was damp, how the service ramp to the delivery bay was technically code compliant, but so steep it was nearly impossible to use without help. He saw the building not as a monument of architecture, but as a series of obstacles and solutions. He was giving her something her mother's millions never could: ground truth. Meanwhile, Lenora's suspicion was a seed taking root in stony ground. She couldn't put her finger on it, but the data was becoming inconsistent. Cora was thriving, yes, but she was also more secretive. She deflected questions about the VR system with a vague, "It's cool," before changing the subject. One morning, Lenora asked Mr. Jennings for the security logs for the penthouse elevator. "Just a routine safety audit," she said, her tone casual. The logs showed the elevator descending to the lobby every night between 1 and 2 a.m. and returning just before 4. "Is my daughter speaking with anyone on the night staff?" Lenora asked, her eyes fixed on the security chief. Mr. Jennings chose his words with the care of a man walking on a wire. "She has been seen in the lobby after hours, Ms. Roth. The night janitor, Mr. Gray, is usually on that floor at that time. They've exchanged pleasantries. Pleasantries, Lenora repeated, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. She knew what kind of pleasantries a man like that, a janitor, a single father by the looks of the file she'd had HR pull, would want with the daughter of Lenora Roth. It was an equation she understood perfectly. Access plus proximity equals opportunity. A quiet anger, cold and sharp, began to build in her. She would deal with it. But first, she needed undeniable proof. Unaware of the storm gathering above, the small family in the lobby was embarking on a new project. Rowan's 8th birthday was 2 weeks away. "I want to get him something," Cora told Ansel one night, her voice low. "A real present, not just candy." The problem was immense. She had no money of her own, no way to leave the building, no method of purchasing something without it appearing on one of her mother's meticulous expense reports. "My mom buys me things to solve problems. I want to give him something just because." Ansel looked at his son, who was completely absorbed in drawing a detailed cross-section of a badger's underground home. "The best gifts aren't bought, Cora. They're made." A slow smile spread across his face. "What about Fort Acorn? What if we built it for him?" Cora's breath caught. The squirrel fortress from Rowan's drawings was a thing of legend in their little group. To build it, to make it real, it felt like an act of magic. Their mission began the next night. Ansel became a master scavenger. He produced scraps of sturdy cardboard from the recycling bins, leftover wood from a crate that had delivered a sculpture for the West Garden, and a small bag of bottle caps he'd been collecting. Cora, with her designer's eye, became the architect. She drew up blueprints in her notebook, calculating the height of the ramparts and the placement of the watchtowers. The supply closet where Ansel and Rowan had hidden became their workshop. Under the light of a single bare bulb, surrounded by mops and buckets, they worked. Ansel taught her how to score the cardboard so it would bend without breaking, how to use wood glue to create a strong bond. She showed him how to use the geometry from her math lessons to make the towers perfectly round. He cut the pieces with his utility knife, and she assembled them, her nimble fingers surprisingly adept at the delicate work. They fashioned shields for the squirrel soldiers from bottle caps and made tiny ladders from snapped-off coffee stirrers. The project was a quiet joy, a secret built from discarded things. It was the complete antithesis of Cora's life, which was built of expensive things that often felt discarded. One night, as they were carefully gluing a tiny flag made from a scrap of red cloth to the highest tower, Ansel paused. "You're happy," he said. It wasn't a question. Cora looked at the model in front of them, this beautiful, ridiculous thing they had made together. Her hands were smudged with glue and paint, and she had never felt more capable. "Yes," she said, "I am." On the night before Rowan's birthday, they finished it. The fort was magnificent, a testament to their shared imagination. They carefully placed it on a high shelf in the supply closet, hidden behind a stack of cleaning solvent boxes. Ansel closed the closet door, a sense of quiet triumph settling over him. He looked at Cora, her face glowing with pride in the dim light of the lobby. In this moment, with the secret gift hidden away, and the building sleeping around them, everything felt perfect. It was the deep, calm breath before the plunge, a perfect, fragile moment of peace before the world outside their small bubble remembered they existed and decided to tear its way in. The air in their little corner of the lobby hummed with a conspiratorial joy. Ansel had brought a single, slightly squashed cupcake from the bakery near his apartment, and now it sat on a napkin on the floor, a lone candle flickering bravely. It was just after midnight, the official start of Rowan's 8th birthday. "Okay, buddy, make a wish," Ansel said, his voice thick with affection. Rowan squeezed his eyes shut so tightly his whole face scrunched up. He wished for the usual things, a new bike, for his hamster to learn how to talk. But then he added a new one, a silent, fervent wish that every night could be just like this one. He took a deep breath and blew. The tiny flame vanished, leaving a thin curl of smoke that smelled like sugar and hope. "Now for the big one," Cora said, her eyes shining. Ansel unlocked the supply closet and retrieved the gift. He placed Fort Acorn on the floor in front of his son. For a full 10 seconds, Rowan was utterly silent, his eyes wide, tracing the lines of the tiny cardboard ramparts and the bottle-cap shields of the squirrel soldiers. He gently touched the small red flag at the top of the highest tower. "You built it," he breathed, his voice filled with a reverence usually reserved for things seen in museums. "It's real." He threw his arms around Cora's neck, a hug so spontaneous and fierce it almost rocked her in her chair. Then he launched himself at his father. "It's the best present in the whole world!" Ansel caught him, laughing, his heart feeling so full he thought it might burst. He looked over at Cora, who was watching them with tears brimming in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of a joy so pure and overwhelming it had to spill over. In that moment, they weren't a CEO's daughter and a janitor and his son. They were just a family, celebrating. It was such a perfect moment that none of them heard the soft click of the service stairwell door opening. None of them saw the figure that stood in the shadows by the marble pillars, watching. Lenora Roth had not come down to find them. She had come down to confirm a conclusion she had already reached. She had seen the elevator logs, heard the security chief's carefully chosen words. In her world, patterns revealed truths, and the pattern here was clear. An employee was taking advantage of his position, getting too close to her vulnerable daughter. She had expected to find him being overly familiar, perhaps asking for something. She did not expect to find this. She did not expect to see her daughter, her carefully protected, isolated daughter, sitting on the floor, out of her chair, propped against a cleaning cart, laughing, with a smudge of chocolate frosting on her cheek. She did not expect to see them gathered around a ridiculous-looking homemade castle as if it were a treasure. She did not expect to see them look so happy. The sight did not soften her. It hardened her. This was worse than she imagined. The manipulation was deeper, more insidious. He hadn't just gotten close to her. He had made her love him. "What is this?" Her voice sliced through the warm air, cold and sharp as a shard of glass. Ansel froze, his hand still on Rowan's back. He shot to his feet, instantly placing himself between Lenora and the children. Cora's laughter died in her throat. She looked up at her mother, and the joy on her face was replaced by sheer terror. "Mom, I can explain." "Be quiet, Cora," Lenora snapped, her eyes fixed on Ansel. They were cold, flat, and full of a certainty that left no room for explanation. "You," the word was an indictment. "You have 10 seconds to tell me what you think you're doing with my daughter." "It's my son's birthday," Ansel said, his voice steady despite the frantic pounding of his heart. He pushed Rowan gently behind him. "His birthday?" Lenora let out a short, incredulous laugh. "And you thought it was appropriate to celebrate it here, with her? Did you think she'd get you a better present than you could afford? Is that the goal? To work your way into her life so you can work your way into my bank account?" "No," Cora cried, struggling to push herself up. "It's not like that. Ansel is my friend. They're my friends." "They are not your friends," Lenora said, her voice dangerously low as she advanced on them. "He is an employee, a janitor, and he is preying on a lonely little girl. It's the oldest story in the book." She stopped in front of Ansel, who stood his ground, his face pale but his expression resolute. "I have no doubt you have a sob story. They always do. But I'm not interested in hearing it." "That's enough," Ansel said, his own voice dropping. It held no anger, only a firm, immovable dignity. "You can say what you want about me, but you will not do it in front of my son, and you will not speak to your daughter that way." The defiance, quiet as it was, seemed to make something in Lenora snap. But before she could speak, Cora found her voice. and it wasn't the small, hesitant voice of the girl who lived on the 50th floor. It was a voice filled with all the frustration and loneliness and burgeoning strength of the last few weeks. "Stop it!" she shouted, and the word echoed in the cavernous lobby. Lenora froze, shocked into silence. "You don't know anything. For years, all you've done is try to fix me. You bought me tutors and therapists and a chair that costs more than a car and a headset so I could see a world I don't even want. But you never once just sat with me. Not once." Tears were streaming down her face now, hot and furious. "He sat with me," she said, pointing a trembling finger at Ansel. "He listened. He didn't try to fix me. He just saw me. He and Rowan are the only people in this entire building who have ever made me feel like I wasn't a problem to be solved." She grabbed her tablet from the pouch of her chair, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She swiped the screen on and held it up. The logo for the open door glowed in the dim light. "You think I'm just a lonely little girl? I built this, me. While you were on your calls with Tokyo and London, I was building this. An app to help people. Something that matters. And Ansel helped me. His ideas are in here. His kindness is in here. Something you know nothing about." For a single, solitary second, Lenora's composure cracked. She looked from the app on the screen to the fierce, defiant face of her daughter, and a flicker of confusion, of doubt, crossed her features. But it was fleeting. To accept what Cora was saying would be to accept her own colossal failure, and Lenora Roth did not fail. She pivoted. She reasserted control. She turned back to Ansel, her face a mask of cold, settled rage. "You're fired," she said, the words falling like stones into the silence. "Get your things, get your son, and get out of my building." "Mom, no!" Cora screamed. "I want you gone in 5 minutes," Lenora continued, ignoring Cora completely. "A security escort will see you out. Your final paycheck will be mailed. And be assured, Mr. Gray, I will be making a call to the head of every major property management company in this city. You will not push a broom in a respectable building again." Ansel looked at Lenora, then at the devastated face of Cora, and finally down at his son, who was crying silently into his leg. There were no words left to say. He had gambled on kindness and lost. He knelt and picked up the squashed cupcake. He took Rowan's hand. Then he walked over to the beautiful, magnificent Fort Acorn, the gift that had cost them everything, and gently placed it at Cora's feet. "Happy birthday, son," he whispered, his voice breaking. Then, without another look at the woman who had just destroyed his life, he walked away, leading his small, weeping son toward the employee locker room, leaving Cora utterly alone in the wreckage of their beautiful, secret world. The silence that flooded the lobby after they left was immense, a physical weight that pressed down on Cora. The only sound was the heartbroken sob that escaped her own throat. Mr. Jennings appeared at her side as if summoned from the marble itself. "Miss Roth," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "your mother asked me to escort you back to the penthouse." Cora didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the model of Fort Acorn. It looked small and fragile in the vast, empty room. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever owned. And now it was just evidence. Lenora strode back from the service corridor, her face a mask of resolute control. She had seen Ansel and his son out. The problem had been excised. Now she just had to manage the fallout. "That's enough, Cora," she said, her tone crisp, as if scolding a child for a minor tantrum. "The man is gone. It's over. You were manipulated. In time, you'll be grateful." She gestured to Mr. Jennings. "And get rid of that thing." She flicked a dismissive hand toward the fort. "I don't want any more of his trash cluttering up my lobby." "No!" Cora's voice was a raw shriek. Before Jennings could touch it, she launched her chair forward, shielding the fort with her own body. "You can't have it. It's mine." Lenora's jaw tightened. This was an unacceptable level of defiance. Cora, do not make a scene. It's a pile of garbage. You will come upstairs now. It's not garbage, Cora cried, tears blurring the sight of her mother's cold face. It's the only real thing anyone's ever given me. She spun her chair around and sped toward the elevators, not waiting for her mother. She didn't look back. She didn't see the flicker of something, not anger, but a deep, unsettling confusion in Lenora's eyes before it was replaced by a mask of hardened resolve. For the next 3 days, the penthouse on the 50th floor became a silent battlefield. Cora locked her bedroom door. She refused to come out. She refused her meals, leaving the trays untouched outside her door. She refused her tutors, her therapists, her medication. The expensive VR headset sat on her desk, its silver case gathering a fine layer of dust. Her silence was a fortress far more impregnable than Fort Acorn, and there were no secret ways in. Lenora tried to breach the walls with logic and authority. She spoke through the door, her voice clipped and reasonable. Cora, this behavior is unproductive. We can discuss your feelings once you are behaving rationally. The only response was silence. She tried threats. If you do not open this door, I will have Mr. Jennings remove it from its hinges. Silence. She tried bribery, sending a message through the household intercom that the top robotics company in the country wanted to send her their new prototype companion, Pet. The silence that answered was colder than ever. Meanwhile, in a small, cramped apartment miles away, Ansel Gray was packing cardboard boxes. The eviction notice had given them 2 weeks. It was more than he'd expected. He suspected Lenora Roth preferred her problems to simply disappear, and paying a month's rent to a landlord was a small price to ensure he and Rowan vanished quickly. He had spent 2 days making calls, following up on leads, but Lenora's promise had been ruthlessly efficient. The answer was always the same. A polite but firm, "The position has been filled." A hasty, "We're not looking for anyone with your profile right now." He was blacklisted, a ghost in the city's service industry. Rowan sat on his bed, watching his father wrap their plates in newspaper. His tears had dried up, replaced by a quiet, heartbreaking bewilderment. "Is Cora mad at us?" he asked, his voice small. Ansel stopped packing. He sat on the edge of the bed and pulled his son close. "No, buddy, not at all. This isn't about her. It's about her mom." "But why was she so angry? We just had a cupcake." How could he explain it? How could he tell a child about class and fear and the kind of pride that curdles into cruelty? "Sometimes, Rowan," he said, choosing his words carefully, "grown-ups get scared. And when they get scared, they forget how to be kind. They build big walls to feel safe, and they get angry if anyone tries to look over them." "But we weren't looking over her wall," Rowan whispered. "We were just sitting on the floor." "I know," Ansel said, hugging him tightly. "I know." Back in the silent penthouse, Lenora was losing. She stood in Cora's empty dining spot at the massive table, staring at her daughter's locked door. Every tool in her formidable arsenal, money, power, logic, authority, was useless. She was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech empire, a woman who could bend markets to her will, but she couldn't compel a 10-year-old girl to open a door. Late that night, unable to work, unable to rest, she found herself in Cora's room. The staff had a master key. She walked in, half expecting a confrontation, but Cora was asleep, her face pale and tear-streaked. The room was pristine, except for the tablet left on the desk. Lenora picked it up. The screen lit up, displaying the last thing Cora had been working on, the interface for the open door. Lenora's fingers moved across the screen, swiping through the elegant, intuitive design. It was good. No, it was more than good. It was brilliant. It was clean, user-centric, and solved a problem with an empathy that most of her own highly paid developers lacked. And then she saw it. A small notation in the corner of a design schematic, written in Cora's neat script. Noise level indicator, Ansel's idea. The 4 words were a piece of data that broke the entire algorithm of her anger. A predator doesn't offer gentle, practical suggestions for an accessibility app. A manipulator doesn't inspire a child to create something so full of compassion. For the first time, a hairline crack appeared in the foundation of her certainty. She remembered the look on Ansel Gray's face, not cunning, but dignified. She remembered the fort made of trash and the look of pure, unadulterated joy on her daughter's face. A joy she hadn't been able to produce with all the money in the world. She sank into Cora's desk chair. The vast, glittering city spread out before her, a kingdom she commanded. But in the quiet of this room, surrounded by the evidence of a life she had failed to understand, she felt a terrifying, unfamiliar emotion. It was not anger. It was not frustration. It was doubt. Cold, isolating, and absolute. She, Lenora Roth, the woman who was never wrong, had made a catastrophic miscalculation, and she had absolutely no idea how to fix it. Doubt, once it took root, was a voracious weed. It choked out the easy certainties that had structured Lenora's entire life. For 2 more days, she tried to work, but the numbers on her screens blurred. The silence from her daughter's room was a constant, humming accusation. On the 3rd night, she found herself in the lobby at 2 a.m. A new janitor was there, a sullen man who never made eye contact. The warmth that had somehow inhabited this cold space was gone. Lenora walked to the alcove where she had found them. Tucked against the baseboard was a single forgotten crayon, a vibrant green. She stared at it before stooping, an unfamiliar gesture, to pick it up. It felt like a small, solid piece of a world she had shattered. She couldn't delegate an apology. She needed to understand. The next afternoon, she did something she hadn't done in 20 years. She drove herself. She took her sports car to the address from Ansel Gray's file. The neighborhood wasn't a slum. It was just a place where people lived, their lives visible and a little frayed at the edges. The sight of it made her own narrative of a cunning predator feel not just wrong, but ridiculous. That evening, she summoned Mr. Jennings to the penthouse. "Tell me what you saw," she said, her voice quiet. "Not your report, just what you saw in the lobby." Mr. Jennings, a master of survival, knew the wind had changed. "I saw them talking, Ms. Roth. The boy was usually drawing. Your daughter, she watched him. I heard them laughing once." He paused. "I never saw anything improper. It was just against protocol." "Did she seem happy?" Lenora asked, the question costing her more than she would ever admit. "I have worked in this building for 15 years, Jennings said. "I have never seen that child look happy before, not like that." The simple statement landed like a physical blow. She had been so focused on protecting her daughter from a phantom threat that she had become the real one. She had punished a man for the crime of being kind. The next step was clear, and it terrified her. She made a call to HR. The information came back within minutes, and it was worse than she feared. Ansel Gray had been served an eviction notice. His references were being rejected. She hadn't just cost him a job. She was about to make him and his son homeless. The knowledge propelled her into action. She drove back to the apartment building, her car a pearl gray panther in a world of worn-out sedans. She walked into the small, dim lobby and found his name. Gray, 3B. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs, her heels clicking nervously on the worn linoleum. The hallway smelled of old paint and someone frying onions. Standing before the door, Lenora Roth, the woman who commanded boardrooms, felt her courage evaporate. Her hand, when she raised it to knock, was trembling. All her life, she had believed power was the ability to act without hesitation. Now she understood that true power might be found in the terrifying, humbling pause before you knock on a door you have no right to open, praying the person on the other side will grant you the grace you know you don't deserve. Her knuckles hovered an inch from the peeling paint, suspended between devastation and hope. She knocked, 3 sharp raps against the peeling paint. A moment later, the door opened. Ansel Gray stood there, his face a blank mask of exhaustion that hardened into a guarded, weary disbelief when he saw her. Behind him, the small apartment was a landscape of brown cardboard boxes. He didn't speak, just stood in the doorway, a silent barrier. "Mr. Gray," Lenora began, her voice brittle. "I need to speak with you." "I think you've said everything you needed to," he replied, his tone flat. "No," she said, forcing the word out. "What I said in the lobby, that was a story I told myself because I was afraid. I was wrong. The confession was agonizing. What I did was cruel, based on a prejudice I didn't have the decency to admit I held. I am so sorry." His expression didn't soften. "An apology doesn't undo an eviction notice. It doesn't explain to my son why his best friend was taken away. What do you want, Ms. Roth? To make it right." "You can't," he said simply. From behind Ansel's legs, a small head peeked out. Rowan saw her and instantly flinched, hiding himself completely. The sight of that reflexive fear struck Lenora with the force of a physical blow. Her corporate armor, her pride, all of it crumbled. She knelt on the worn welcome mat, an act of utter surrender. "Rowan," she said, her voice breaking, "I am so sorry. I should never have yelled. I was the one who was scared, and I messed everything up." Ansel watched the powerful CEO kneel on his doorstep, and his own resolve wavered. He stepped back, a silent invitation. Lenora entered the small apartment, where Rowan's vibrant drawings were still taped to the walls above the packed boxes. "I've already begun the calls to undo the damage to your reputation," she said, focusing on actionable steps. "I will handle the eviction. You will not lose your home, and your job is yours if you want it." With a raise, he shook his head. "I appreciate that, but we can't go back to the way it was. I can't work for you like that, Ms. Roth, and my son can't have a friendship that has to hide in a supply closet." He looked at her directly, an equal. "This was never about a job. It was about your daughter." "She won't speak to me," Lenora whispered, the admission raw. "I don't know what to do." "Let her see her friend," Ansel said. "That's the only thing that will fix any of this." The simplicity of it was staggering. "Yes," Lenora said immediately. "Of course. Anything." She fumbled in her purse, pulling out a pen and a business card and scribbling her personal cell number on the back. "Call me tomorrow. We'll arrange something. For the children, a park, a museum, somewhere neutral." Ansel took the card. "I'll talk to Rowan." Lenora nodded. There was nothing else to say. She had made her plea. She turned and walked out, her heels clicking softly down the stairs. Ansel closed the door, leaning against it. Rowan came and stood beside him, leaning his head against his father's side. "Is she still angry?" Rowan asked. "No, buddy," Ansel said, wrapping an arm around his son. "I think she's just very, very sad." He looked at the half-sealed box in the middle of their living room. For the first time in days, he felt a tiny, fragile sliver of hope. The phone call was brief, two people navigating a new and fragile truce. They agreed to meet at the Science Museum the next day. When Lenora told Cora, it was like a key turning in a lock that had been rusted shut for days. The news that she would see Rowan was the only thing that could have breached the walls of her silent fortress. She emerged from her room, pale and wary, but with a flicker of light in her eyes. The reunion in the museum's vast lobby was achingly awkward. Lenora and Ansel stood apart, guardians from different worlds. But the children had no such hesitation. "Cora!" Rowan shouted, running forward. He didn't hug her, just held out a folded piece of paper. "I made you this. It's a map to the treasure of the Goblin King." Cora took it, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face. "Does he have any fire-breathing trolls?" she asked softly, their inside joke instantly re-establishing their world. "Millions," Rowan whispered, and then they were gone, disappearing toward the dinosaurs, leaving the two adults alone in the sudden silence. "He missed her," Ansel said. "She Hasn't been herself, Lenora replied. They walked slowly, following the distant sound of the children's voices. I looked at her app, Lenora confessed. It's brilliant. My best design team couldn't have done it better. She paused. Your idea, the noise level indicator, was a key piece of functionality. She stopped, looking at the giant pendulum swinging in the atrium. I manage hundreds of the most brilliant minds in tech. I never knew my own daughter was one of them. I never asked. She looked at Ansel. You see the world from the ground up. The cracks, the slow doors. I only ever see the skyline. Most people don't have to look at the cracks, Ansel said, not unkindly. It must be hard, Lenora said softly, changing the subject. Raising him alone. It's the only thing that's not hard, Ansel replied, and the simple truth of it settled between them. Loving him is the easy part. Lenora looked away, a flicker of pained honesty in her eyes. For me, it's the other way around. The business is easy, but loving her, I keep trying to solve her like an equation, and she's a person. A small, rusty laugh escaped her lips, surprising them both. Ansel found himself smiling back. They found the kids in the planetarium, lying side by side watching galaxies swirl across the domed ceiling, their heads close together. They were two small children in a vast universe, but they weren't alone. As the day ended, the awkwardness between Lenora and Ansel had been replaced by a quiet understanding. They had found a common language, the fierce, boundless love they had for their children. As they prepared to part ways at the entrance, Lenora found she was unwilling to let the connection sever. We're having dinner on Friday, she said, the words impulsive and right. A simple dinner. We would like it very much if you and Rowan would join us. It was not an order. It was an invitation. Ansel looked at his son, then back at Lenora, this powerful, complicated woman who was trying so hard. We'd like that very much, he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. As Lenora drove away, she felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. The path forward was uncertain, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a problem to be solved. It felt like a story waiting to be written. The Friday dinner began with the intimidating gleam of catered silver dishes on the massive marble table. But it was saved by a 10-year-old girl's craving for something she'd only read about. At Cora's request, the 5-course meal was abandoned for grilled cheese sandwiches made in the vast stainless steel kitchen. The sound of their laughter as they huddled around the kitchen island, eating the simple, perfect meal, was the first time the penthouse had truly felt like a home. That dinner was the first step of a new journey. The awkward truce blossomed into a real friendship, and then, quietly and naturally, into something more. Their weekends were spent together, at parks, museums, and quiet evenings in the penthouse watching movies, the four of them tangled together on the enormous sofa. Ansel became an indispensable consultant for Cora's app, his ground-level knowledge giving it a practicality that made it truly revolutionary. Lenora, in turn, found herself helping Rowan with his school projects, discovering a patient, nurturing side of herself she never knew existed. One evening, after the children were asleep, Ansel found Lenora in her office, looking at the single green crayon she kept on her desk. It's a reminder, she said softly, that my entire world changed because I finally stopped and looked at something small. You weren't scared, he said. You were brave enough to knock on a door you didn't have to. He reached across the desk and took her hand. His was warm and calloused. Hers was smooth and manicured. They fit together perfectly. A year after their first meeting, they found themselves back in the lobby of the Onyx, long after the last of the day staff had gone home. The new night janitor, a friendly man Ansel had recommended for the job, gave them a knowing smile and left them alone in their old corner. As the children scouted for the ghost of the Goblin King, Ansel turned to Lenora. I used to think this place was a different world, he said quietly. But it's not. It's just a building. It's the people inside that make it warm. He reached into his pocket. He didn't kneel. He simply stood before her, his heart in his eyes. "Lenora Roth, you are the warmest person I have ever known. You just needed someone to help you find the thermostat." He opened his hand. In his palm was a simple, elegant silver ring. Engraved on the inside was a tiny, perfect key. "I know you don't need anyone to solve your problems," he said, "but I was hoping you might want a partner to share them with. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Lenora's face, tears of pure joy. "Yes," she whispered, as Cora and Rowan ran back to them, their faces beaming. "Yes, of course, yes." Their wedding was not a society event. It was held on a bright, clear autumn day, on the great lawn of the city park. Cora, her chair woven with ivy and white roses, was the maid of honor. Rowan, looking proud in a small suit, was the best man. Their vows were simple, solid truths spoken under the open sky. "I thought my job was to build walls to keep you safe," Lenora said, her voice steady. "You taught me that love is about building bridges." "I saw you as someone from a different world," Ansel said, his hand in hers. "You taught me that there is only one world, and kindness is the only language that matters." Later that evening, the four of them stood on the penthouse balcony. The city glittered below. The same view Cora had once looked at with such loneliness. Now, tucked under Ansel's arm, with Rowan on Lenora's lap, she was home. They were not two separate units anymore. They were a family. Ansel squeezed her shoulder gently. "What are you thinking about?" Cora looked at her new family, then out at the city. No longer a painting behind glass, but a world of promise. "I was just thinking," she said, her smile as bright as the city lights, "that some doors you have to open for yourself, but the best ones are the ones you open for each other."